Today, we put you on the right path, providing you with sound health advice to extend your years. Welcome to another edition of Jamaica Magazine. I'm Adrian Atkinson. There's also news and a few important messages. Stay with us.
If you no want pop down and fenke, you fi burn mosquito and run with dengue. So no make water circle in open container. For them we read up under the danger. Usher them out, run them away. Slap them with the zapper and down them with spray. Use mosquito net and mosquito screen. Protect your household, now make them come in. If you no want pop down and fenke, if you burn mosquito and run with dengue. If pain lick your head and your joints and your eye, and you want fever meat and your temperature high, it could be dengue, don't hesitate. See a doctor, don't self-medicate. For some painkiller can make you bleed and you will try to recover and no succeed. We no want pop down and fenke. We fi burn mosquito and run with dengue.
A message from the Ministry of Health.
Good day, I'm Lorraine Mendez and this is your JIS News for Tuesday, March 19. Minister of Finance Dr. Nigel Clarke says the country's move to an inflation-targeting policy will ensure low, stable and predictable inflation. Inflation targeting is a monetary policy regime in which a central bank has a specific target inflation rate for the medium term and informs the public. Dr. Clarke says this regime is gradually being incorporated by the Bank of Jamaica BOJ as the cornerstone of its monetary policy.
Full-fledged inflation targeting will only become a reality when we complete our next phase of central bank reforms, our modernization of the central bank, and to make the central bank independent and to upgrade its governance framework, put in inflation targeting as the centerpiece of its monetary policy objectives.
Dr. Clarke was speaking at yesterday's opening of a two-day workshop on international economics and finance. Governor of the Central Bank of Paraguay, Carlos Fernandez Valdovinos, was at the workshop and voiced his support of an inflation-targeting regime for Jamaica, saying the country's macroeconomic stability provided the ideal environment for such a policy.
There is no better time for you to do the reforms than right now. That is peaceful. It's very bad to try to do the reform during a crisis, being that economic crisis, financial crisis, and exchange rate crisis. This is the right time. So hopefully you're going to have a brand new central bank charter that is going to be useful for the future.
The International Economics and Finance Workshop was hosted by the BOJ. It brought together top researchers and policymakers within the Western Hemisphere to discuss recent theoretical and empirical advances in international economics and finance. A tuition-free school for children living below the poverty line is to be constructed in St. Catherine by the year 2020. It will cater to students aged 3 to 19 years. The Ministry of Education signed a Memorandum of Understanding with Crystal House International on Monday to establish the facility. Portfolio Minister Senator Ruel Reid says construction will begin following approval by Cabinet.
Government of Jamaica has agreed to a long-term lease for lands located in Spanish Town, St. Catherine. Kindergarten and grade 1 will each be accommodated in 3 classrooms designed for 20 students each. With the exception of kindergarten and grade 1, school capacity will be planned for 30 students per classroom and 60 students per grade level.
Crystal House, a U.S.-based charity, will construct the property at its own expense to accommodate 840 students from kindergarten through to grade 13 at the secondary level.
We have terrific plans for this little school. It's not that little, is it? 840 kids. And we really look forward to working with the ministry and to helping to make lives better for the little children of Jamaica.
A $300 million program will be rolled out to further develop the country as a gastronomy destination. Among the initiatives is an agricultural attraction in Lilliput, St. James, to engage travelers in the From Farm to Table experience. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says the program will also include the hosting of more food festivals and funding for small farmers.
Food tourism is going to be the major drive for a greater experiential tourism product in Jamaica, but it is also going to be the basis on which a larger number of ordinary Jamaicans are going to be involved in the value chain of tourism.
Minister Bartlett was speaking at the recent opening of the Grandview restaurant in St. James. The program to develop Jamaica as a gastronomy destination falls under the Tourism Linkages Network, which aims to increase the consumption of local goods and services by guests at resorts and attractions. The Jamaica Defence Force JDF is urging persons who want to join the force to rely only on information from its official website, social media platform, or mainstream news. The warning comes as a fake Jamaica National Service Corps JNSC recruitment advertisement on social media resulted in over 2,000 persons turning up at Oak Park Camp on Monday. While the JDF has launched a probe into the source of the social media post, the Army decided to process the persons who showed up from as far as Westmoreland.
Having seen persons here from all over the island, the military decided not to turn them back today, and the directive was given for us to process and handle as many persons as we could. As a result, a number of these persons have been put through our initial enlistment test, which involves pre-medical screenings and sitting an academic exam.
National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says the government is committed to strengthening border security as part of measures to curb the illicit flow of weapons into the country. Minister Chang says the trafficking of illegal weapons continues to be a threat to international and domestic peace and security.
Jamaica Defence Force, of course, recently acquired some additional equipment to assist in protecting our borders. We're an island state, and border security is critical to our continued success in fighting the scourge of crime. By reducing illicit guns, we expect not only to stem crime, but improve our economic outlook.
Minister Chang was addressing members of the diplomatic community recently. The Security Minister says Jamaica will continue to strengthen relations with its international partners as it implements policies and programs to create a safer Jamaica.
Partnerships, exchanges, and scholarships have greatly facilitated capacity building, foster greater mutual social understanding, and this will undoubtedly result in the continued development and progress of our countries.
And finally, the Housing Agency of Jamaica, HAJ, has finalized the preparation of more than 400 land titles since April 2018 and is looking to increase that number to 500 by March 31 this year. The agency's Senior Manager for Community Development, Nakia McMorris, made the announcement while addressing a JIS think tank recently. Mrs. McMorris said emphasis was being placed on housing areas that were part of the now-defunct Operation Pride.
We have over 80 communities that we work with. And so during this year, what we've done is that we've taken out a certain set of communities that we're focusing on, most of them being in Westmoreland and also in St. James. That's where the agency has a lot of titles for. And that's where we know we can make the most impact in terms of issuing the titles from the agency's end.
Mrs. McMorris said the HAJ was working on a system that would make the process of getting land titles much easier for residents, including measures to settle outstanding payments. The HAJ has reportedly issued over 9,000 titles since 2012, with 7,000 more to be distributed. And that's it for JIS News Today. I'm Lorraine Mendez. Thanks for watching.
Up next, the latest happenings out of the office of the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister mourns with New Zealand, sends condolences to families of the victims of Ethiopian Airlines, and
I think that by all accounts, Jamaica is doing very well.
You're watching Jamaica House Weekly. I'm Anthony Morgan. Prime Minister Andrew Holness last Friday condemned the killing of 50 persons and the injuring of scores more at two mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. Calling the mass shooting a horrible tragedy, Mr. Holness said terrorism had no place in society. As he joined in mourning with the people of New Zealand, the Prime Minister extended condolences to the victims' families and prayed for the speedy recovery of those injured. A formal letter conveying Prime Minister Holness's sentiments was dispatched to New Zealand's Prime Minister. Prime Minister Andrew Holness issued a similar statement upon learning of the crash of an Ethiopian Airlines jetliner in Addis Ababa on March 10. The aircraft, which had 157 persons from over 35 countries on board, crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all occupants. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Andrew Holness challenged heads of missions and diplomats to implement measures that will improve and sustain economic conditions on the island. At the launch of the annual Diplomatic Week observation, he declared that Jamaica's economy was doing very well and could be used as a model to other countries. Asserting that the country was in a better position when compared to years past, Mr. Holness cited a reduction of the debt to gross domestic product ratio as well as record employment.
It came at great sacrifice of the people, and it came as a result of the building of social consensus. Indeed, that underpins everything that we've been able to do on the economic front.
In addition to tourism and diversifying energy, the Prime Minister highlighted the significant infrastructure development projects taking place in and around the corporate area.
We expect that we will finish those major infrastructure developments in the next 2 months, and that will have a significant impact on our economy. Clearly, the improvement in roads, along with sewage, water, telecommunications, will create the basis for a regeneration of Kingston.
Mr. Holness also assured the diplomatic corps that the state was continuously implementing strategies, inclusive of social interventions, to deal with crime and other challenges.
So, good things are happening. The challenges, I believe that we are putting in place the measures to overcome them. And in terms of our foreign affairs and our posture internationally, we continue to support wholeheartedly a system of multilateralism and a system of order in international affairs, which will ensure that small countries like Jamaica can survive. For this government, achieving gender equality is now accepted, understood, and pursued as a condition for inclusive economic growth, social equity, human capital, and socio-emotional development. It is indeed an integral part of our prosperity plan.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness committing his government to equality as a priority. He was addressing the Women in Law Conference at the University of the West Indies Regional Headquarters on International Women's Day. Mr. Holness revealed that several policy initiatives, including the recently announced $14 billion tax break for businesses, impact gender equality. So too the allocations for 2 additional women's shelter. The country's gender policy, the Prime Minister said, was also geared at addressing gender-based violence.
For the government, it is not just a fashionable catchphrase. These are things that we see as important in ensuring the equitable and inclusive development of our society. And that's why we have been making certain investments.
The Prime Minister recently outlined plans to improve the historic capital of Spanish Town, St. Catherine.
There are significant allocations to repair roadways within the town centre and the adjoining community. But we also have plans for the development of the infrastructure and the buildings in the town. You have so many heritage sites that in any other country, this little town would be a tourist destination. There are not many towns within the Caribbean that has the architecture, Victorian and later, that Spanish Town has. And it is a sad thing to see it deteriorating and the citizens not getting the full value of the history.
Mr. Holness was addressing participants in the 10,000 Men and Their Families March organized by churches in the community on March 10. And finally, the Prime Minister sent congratulations to Arthur Williams, who has been appointed Jamaica's High Commissioner Designate to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's how we close out Jamaica House Weekly. Be sure to join us next time for more news stories coming out of the office of the Prime Minister.
It's National Nutrition Month. 31 days to be informed of the right food choices to develop better eating habits and a physical activity plan. Coming up, we hear from the experts on warding off non-communicable diseases.
Diabetes is a common illness. Most of us may be aware of its various complications, such as diabetic retinopathy and neuropathy, diabetic kidney disease, and so on. But when it comes to deaths caused from diabetes, cardiovascular complications account for the majority. Diabetes is recognized as one of 4 major factors for developing cardiovascular disease, the others being hypertension, obesity, and cigarette smoking.
About 68% of persons over the age of 65, and this is data now from the American Heart Association, 65% of persons over the age of 65 who have diabetes will die from heart disease, and about another 16% will die of stroke.
Before we take a look at how to manage or even prevent cardiovascular complications of diabetes, let us look at how persons come to develop the disease.
In a nutshell, what generally happens is that diabetic persons have a more rapid rate at which fat and cholesterol is deposited in the arterial system. So we all have that. It's considered part of the process of aging. Fat and cholesterol is being laid down in our arteries. However, diabetic persons tend to have that happen at a more rapid rate. Okay? And as a result of that, what tends to happen is that diabetic persons will progress to a point where they have compromised vessels. So in other words, the lumen, the diameter of the vessel, is narrowed, the flow of blood is limited.
And as the heart muscles become starved of blood, various acids accumulate and persons will tend to experience what is called angina, or a type of chest pain.
You may get complete blockage of the vessel, which may now result in what is called a heart attack.
Heart tissues are not meant to function in an environment where the blood sugar level is elevated. And so, another incidence of diabetic cardiovascular complication results where high blood sugar levels in persons who are diabetic becomes directly toxic to heart cells. This impairs the ability of blood vessels to open normally under conditions of stress, such as exercise, and also causes inflammation and impaired clotting of the blood.
So if they are chronically exposed to those levels of elevated blood sugars, then there are biochemical consequences. There's weakness of the heart muscle, and patients, many of them, go on to developing heart failure and so on.
The diagnosis of cardiovascular complications is more difficult in diabetics, where the symptoms appear unclear or may be different from the non-diabetic patient. Take, for example, a non-diabetic person with, say, coronary heart disease.
Generally, they will say, well, look, doc, I felt pressing pain to the center of my chest. It's moving down my left arm. It comes on with activity. It stops when I stop engaging in whatever activity. It feels like a weight or like a pressure, like a squeezing sensation, and it's associated with other things like shortness of breath and so on. Diabetics, however, have a particular problem because they have damage to the nerves, and therefore they may not actually experience chest pain at all. If they do, it may not be the typical angina which we would normally expect a patient to describe. Okay? So oftentimes diabetic patients who are having cardiovascular disease will say that, doc, I just feel a little funny sensation in my chest, a little discomfort. I just feel short of breath, or, I'm walking up the stairs, or I'm running after my grandkids and I find that I'm just out of breath.
The rest of the diagnostic process, however, is similar and may include an echocardiogram, ECG, blood works, or various stress tests accessible at public health facilities and at the Heart Foundation of Jamaica. Generally, diabetic patients will have elevated blood sugars in their urine, which, if identified, serves as a red flag and need for more specific testing. A urinalysis or urine dipstick test is generally done as part of school medicals, oftentimes as a screening test for diabetes. As with every illness, early detection and prevention is key to having good health.
It would be good every year for every person to be checked. If you're diabetic, you would have been told how often you need to check your blood sugar by your health professional. But if you're just doing checks and you're healthy otherwise, then at least once a year to check your cholesterol, your sugar, your blood pressure, do your ECG to see if there is any abnormality in the heart.
The treatment of cardiovascular disease in diabetic patients is more holistic, involving lifestyle changes to include diet, exercise, and maintaining a healthy weight.
In a nutshell, we advocate for, eating primarily fruits and vegetables, things like whole grains and nuts, limiting one's intake of fast foods, foods with high fat content, high cholesterol, salt, and so on, and portion size management as well.
More unprocessed foods, less of the very refined high sugar foods. So there are those foods that are obviously very high in sugar. So the typical recommendation, if you look at a plate, half of the plate should be more plant-based foods, leafy vegetables, and some fruit.
In general, 150 minutes minimum per week of moderate exercise such as swimming, brisk walking, jogging, or cycling is recommended. Besides the lifestyle changes, clinical treatment through prescription drugs and surgical procedures is an important element in caring for persons with cardiovascular complications of diabetes.
We have medications to address symptoms. We have medications to prolong life. And that forms an important part of the approach. There are a variety of procedures which diabetic patients and other non-diabetic patients may qualify for, or it may be necessary to pursue. So we speak of things like stenting, for example, coronary artery bypass grafting, which is, of course, open heart surgery, major surgery. Diabetic patients we have a lower threshold for referring diabetics for that kind of procedure just because of the severity of their disease.
Medications developed primarily for use by diabetic patients have been shown to have significant cardiovascular benefits as they reduce the risk of death and complications related to cardiovascular disease in diabetic patients. But with most of them still under patent, access is quite costly. Your best treatment option is to adopt healthy lifestyle practices that make you less prone to developing diabetes or cardiovascular disease.
Similar to the country's motto, out of many one people, Jamaica's indigenous dance movement is a rich mix of African, European, Spanish, and several other ethnic influences. A shoulder movement from the British, hip roll from the Africans, and so on. All gyrations and synchronized rhythmic stepping, locals have merged to birth new dance styles.
Indigenous means that it was created here. It's native to the space. I call some things indigenous formalized. They're indigenous, and all these indigenous things, like, for example, gere, they say it's a creolized form. Now, when you say creolized form, that means some of it was shaped here, so then it becomes indigenous. So there are quite a few others.
Brookings reveals a unique mixture of African and European influences. The Brookings Party is a stately, dipping, gliding dance typified by the thrust and recovery action of the hip and leg.
So, for example, Brookings, you cannot go back to Africa and find Brookings. Remember, Brookings was a celebration for the abolition of slavery in this country called Jamaica. And there's a long story behind that.
So that position happens in Brookings. All right, get up. But she not do it all the way. When them do it, it's all down on the ground and the back and back.
This band of masqueraders scare a few, especially children. Some persons are definitely not in favor of one of the characters, the devil. John Kunu goes as far back as slavery, but at that time, the bands were very large and elaborate. The musicians would play tunes of well-known traditional songs on the fife, accompanied by bass and rattling drums, shakas and graters. Their primary dance movement is to prance, behaving wildly as they try to evoke fun or mockery.
Ska are the original sound. Ska are the foundation sound. Ska music is a great, great sound. Jamaica's first international.
What you see down across is arms that come out of Jankuno, come out of our ancient forms as well. And so you see those arms in Ska. Those same arms. What it come from? It have to come anywhere from sky. It come from our ancestral memories, our heritage, and it bleed beautifully into modern day times, into what we call popular dance.
Dancehall in the 1960s, a popular dance then was the ska. Oh yes, skanking was the movement partygoers would do to the rhythm of the similar name, ska punk or hardcore punk.
Jamaica's first international.
When people say they're dancing bingy, also indigenous. Any movement that you see people do in Rastafari, because Rastafari, and it's not only dance.
That's right. Rastafarianism is a religion and it has its own dance.
Although African Kumina has been here for so long, it is a tradition in the space. Kumina was not created here. It is Kikongo. In the language they speak, free Africans and enslaved Africans, the more they came, brought that tradition, that religious tradition, to the space. But over time, because that is from 18-something, it becomes traditional to the space because it's constantly here. Dancehall is indigenous. Everything in dancehall is indigenous. And so everybody should be saying, anybody who dances dancehall should mention Jamaica. Because Jamaica is who created that cultural space that has in it dance. Dancehall goes right back to Africa. And if you go online now and you look at Africans doing dancehall, there's a slightly different flavor to it. But there's a use of bottom, there's a use of, the use is similar. So some things, are what Kamal Brathwaite, the writer from Barbados, says tidelectric. In that the tides of the ocean bring it come, and sometimes the tides of the ocean carry it back. So if you look at dancehall, the ocean bring all of this African, and then sometimes you see it carry back, and dancehall is in Africa now as African dancehall. In dance, it's a forward movement when we decide to be Caribbean-centric. So now we're not necessarily Afrocentric or Eurocentric. We have now created a space of our voice. We are Caribbean-centric in the movements that we create. From the time of ska that you mentioned, all the way up now to dancehall.
As we close the show for yet another day, we thank you so much for staying with us. Please like, share, and visit our webpage and social media platforms. And tomorrow, do join us again right here on this station for another edition of Jamaica Magazine. Until then, I'm Adrian Atkinson. Thank you for watching.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.